The reducer valve sits open on a steel bench in a Navy ordnance lab, no bigger than a fire extinguisher, and it is the reason nobody could explain how a torpedo fired from 6,000 yards away had crossed that distance without leaving a trail. Investigators from the Bureau of Ordnance are standing over a section of Japanese torpedo, recovered largely intact after a failed run, and what they are looking at is not the warhead, not the propeller, not the guidance gear. It is a fist-sized valve assembly that regulates how oxygen enters a combustion chamber. Every American torpedo built up to this point runs on compressed air, which is roughly 78% nitrogen, and nitrogen does not burn. It exits the exhaust as a stream of bright, expanding bubbles that any lookout with binoculars can track back to the submarine that fired it. Japanese torpedoes run on nearly pure oxygen. Oxygen combines almost completely with the fuel and burns clean. So the exhaust is mostly carbon dioxide, easily dissolved and nearly invisible on the surface. The problem, on paper, is that pure oxygen fed into a combustion chamber at ignition is not a fuel system. It is a bomb. Every navy in the world has tried this and abandoned it because the machine kills itself before it kills the target. And yet somewhere between Kure Naval Arsenal and a torpedo tube on a Japanese submarine, engineers had solved that problem, and the men in this room have less than a fully intact example and a stack of fragments to figure out how. Later nicknamed the Long Lance, recovered in pieces after action in the Pacific and shipped back for analysis at the Naval Torpedo Station in Newport, Rhode Island in 1943. Ordnance officers already know from survivor accounts and from measuring craters and hull damage that whatever the Japanese are using hits harder and travels farther than anything in the American arsenal. A standard US Mark 14 torpedo carries a range of roughly 4,500 yards at high speed. Reports from the Solomon Islands campaign describe torpedoes striking ships from distances that should have been physically impossible for a compressed air weapon. 6, 8. In some claims over 11,000 yards. The Bureau's engineers assumed exaggeration, wreckage confusion, mines. Then they got a torpedo to examine directly, and the numbers stopped being a rumor problem and became an engineering problem. If you've ever wondered how ordnance investigators actually work through evidence like this, piece by piece, measurement by measurement, refusing to accept a rumor until the metal confirms it, that's exactly the kind of process we dig into every week on this channel. So if you want more of the real engineering history behind the war, staying subscribed means you won't miss the next one. Back to the bench in Newport. The first thing the team does is trace the fuel system back from the warhead to the alcohol tank, because that part looks familiar. The Japanese torpedo, like the American one, burns a mixture of alcohol and compressed gas to drive a turbine. What is unfamiliar is the size of the gas storage. The Type 95 carries its oxidizer in a flask pressurized to roughly 225 kilograms per square centimeter, more than 3,000 pounds per square inch, nearly double what an American compressed air flask holds at the time. And the flask is filled almost entirely with oxygen rather than ordinary air. One engineer runs the arithmetic twice because the first pass doesn't seem right. Oxygen alone contains roughly 4.5 times more usable oxidizer per liter than compressed air does, since air is mostly inert nitrogen taking up space and adding weight for nothing. That single substitution, air for oxygen, explains both problems the Bureau has been chasing separately. The weightless run and the impossible range are the same discovery wearing two faces. What it means, stated plainly, is that Japan has been running boats with a torpedo carrying more usable energy in the same size tank, producing more thrust for longer, while leaving almost nothing behind on the surface to shoot back at. An American submarine or destroyer captain trying to read the enemy's position off a wake trail on long-lance runs is looking at a mostly empty ocean. Somewhere off Guadalcanal that same autumn, a cruiser or destroyer skipper is doing exactly that, scanning the water for the telltale bubble line that has saved American ships before, seeing nothing, and taking a hit from a range no doctrine says should be possible. The men in Newport don't know the specific ship. They don't need to. The wreckage on the bench in front of them is already telling them why it happened. The second layer of the examination is the part that stops the room. Pure oxygen under pressure is not simply a more efficient fuel. It's an ignition hazard that has ended torpedo programs in other navies before they got past the prototype stage. Introduce oxygen too quickly into a combustion chamber already carrying residual oil, grease, or fuel vapor, and you don't get propulsion. You get an explosion inside the weapon before it clears the tube. British engineers tried an oxygen torpedo in the 1920s and shelved it after test failures. The US Navy had looked at the same concept and rejected it as impractical for exactly this reason. So when the Newport team traces the reducer valve, the small assembly recovered separately and initially assumed to be a secondary regulator of no particular importance, they find a staged system. The torpedo doesn't start on pure oxygen. It starts on ordinary compressed air, runs the engine through ignition and initial acceleration on that safer mixture. And only after the chamber is already hot and running does a second valve begin bleeding in oxygen, gradually increasing the ratio until the engine is burning nearly pure oxygen and alcohol at full speed. It's a workaround, not a miracle. The Japanese hadn't solved the ignition explosion problem chemically. They had solved it procedurally, with sequencing. An officer on the examination team sits back from the bench when the staging sequence becomes clear, because the answer had been sitting in a part everyone assumed was minor. The reducer valve, the piece that gives this find its name in the Bureau's later report, isn't a footnote to the propulsion system. It is the propulsion system. Every other navy that tried oxygen torpedoes had been trying to solve a chemistry problem. Japan solved a timing problem instead, and nobody outside a small circle at Kure Naval Arsenal had thought to look at it that way. The war context matters here. This examination happens roughly a year after the Battle of Tassafaronga, November 1942, where American cruisers with radar and a numerical advantage still lost a ship, and had 3 others crippled by torpedoes fired from Japanese destroyers that, by American estimates at the time, should have been well outside effective range. Tassafaronga becomes a case study at the Naval War College, specifically because officers could not initially explain the disparity between doctrine and outcome. The Newport findings, arriving through 1943 and compiled more fully as more wreckage becomes available, are the explanation those officers had been waiting for. The third layer comes from disassembling the reducer valve itself down to its individual components, and it's here that the metallurgy raises as many questions as the engineering. The valve body and its internal seals have to tolerate pure oxygen at high pressure and moderate heat, without the metal itself igniting. Oxygen doesn't just support combustion. Under pressure, it can make ordinary lubricants and even some metals burn on contact, which is part of why other navies backed away from the concept. The Japanese engineers had selected specific alloys and eliminated standard lubricants from the oxygen side components entirely, relying on the mechanical fit of the parts rather than grease to keep them moving. It's a detail easy to miss and expensive to get wrong, and it tells the Newport team that this wasn't a rushed wartime improvisation. The tolerances speak to years of iterative testing, not months. A cup of coffee goes cold on the corner of the bench while one of the engineers rewrites his notes a third time. because the report he started an hour earlier assumed a simpler mechanism than what the torpedo has actually shown him. That's the moment the scale of the problem stops being abstract for him. This isn't a clever trick bolted onto an otherwise ordinary torpedo. It's a fundamentally different design philosophy that Japan has been quietly perfecting since the early 1930s, under a program most American planners never had visibility into. The build to the discovery is this: American torpedo doctrine, submarine tactics, and even ship lookout procedures have all been built around a single shared assumption: that a torpedo leaves a wake you can see, that the visible bubble trail gives you seconds to maneuver or return fire, and that beyond a certain range, roughly the effective distance of a Mark 14, you are simply safe. The reducer valve on the bench in Newport proves that assumption has been wrong for years in actual combat against American ships, without the Navy fully understanding why until this examination. Here is the discovery, stated plainly. The Long Lance is not faster because of a better engine. It is not more accurate because of better guidance. It carries more oxidizer in the same space, at higher pressure, and burns nearly all of it, instead of hauling nitrogen dead weight across the ocean for nothing. That one substitution, oxygen for air, is the entire secret. Ships were sunk by a torpedo that outperformed the American arsenal because its designers solved a valve timing problem the rest of the world had given up on. The consequence moves fast. Bureau of Ordnance findings from Newport feed directly into revised range safety assumptions issued to Pacific Fleet commanders through 1943 and 1944. Commanders are told, in effect, that the safe zone they had been trained to trust does not exist against this weapon, and that lookout procedures need to account for torpedo hits at ranges previously considered impossible. American torpedo development doesn't fully replicate the Japanese oxygen system. In time to matter for the war, the ignition risk is judged too dangerous to rush into fleet production against a ticking clock. But the intelligence reshapes tactics immediately. Destroyer screens are repositioned. Cruiser commanders are briefed to expect torpedo attacks from ranges that would previously have triggered no evasive response at all. It is not a new weapon that comes out of the Newport lab. It is new knowledge, and in the Pacific in 1943, that turns out to matter just as much. Surviving Type 95 and Type 93 components sit today in a handful of naval history collections, including examples tied to the Newport testing program, mounted in glass cases with placards that describe range and speed in clean, rounded numbers. Most visitors read those numbers, note that the Long Lance was fast, and move on to the next case. What the placard doesn't say is that a torpedo's entire strategic value collapsed the moment American engineers understood one small valve. That the weapon which sank ships from an empty ocean did so not because of some singular stroke of genius, but because Japanese engineers had been willing to ask a patient, procedural question. Not, how do we make oxygen safe, but how do we make the danger arrive late enough not to matter, years before anyone on the American side thought to ask it at all.